We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You are listening to The Underground Marketing Conspiracy, a secret ritual where entrepreneurs acquire highly classified and confidential business knowledge that the top 1% of income earners don't want you to know. And now, your host, Maddie Milligan.
Yo, what is up, my fellow conspirator and conspirators? Welcome to the Underground Marketing Conspiracy. Woo! When I went to Funnel Hacking Live in 2018, there was a speaker there. I think he sold over $100 million online, selling Amazon courses on how to become a successful Amazon seller. And he partnered with someone else, but it was this guy, Jason Fladlien, and he's probably one of the best webinar pitch people in the entire world. I purchased at one point a course from him and Russell Brunson where they sit down together for 3 or 4 hours and they just riff about webinars. And Russell Brunson's perfect webinar strategy works very well, but Webinar Genius, that strategy works very well as well. But there's one point in Funnel Hacking Live where Jason Fladlien essentially talks about there's one principle in marketing that is so underutilized in terms of selling. It's more of a psychological principle, and if you've ever read Influence by Robert Cialdini, it's actually one of the principles in this book. And if you've ever read that book, I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, it must be authority. No, it's not an authority. And then you're like, okay, well, then it must be social proof. And no, it's not social proof. It's not liking, it's not reciprocity, and it's not scarcity. It is commitment and consistency. This is so underutilized. All right. And you might be like, okay, what is commitment and consistency? So let's just go through that really quickly. So you need to, first of all, think about ways you can get people to get committed to a cause, right? Or to get committed and really just to get them to put one foot in the door. So this might be something where you ask them for a quick favor, right? It's like, hey man, do you mind helping me move or something? And they're like, okay, yeah. So at least from there, they can agree. And then they're just going to help you move from there. Maybe you can ask them how they would feel about spending a couple of hours for charity. And they're like, yeah, I'd feel pretty good about that. Okay, cool. How would you feel after? Would you feel good? They'd be like, yeah, I totally feel good about that. Okay, cool. And then from there, it's like, hey, would you mind actually spending a few of the hours? They're like, yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Then maybe you could get them to write some testimonials about that. Maybe you could get them to answer more questions. And maybe you get them to actually write some written statements about their beliefs. Maybe you can get them to set their targets on how they would like to help the cause. This is really going to help move people forward, right? If you've ever done any sales, this works super effectively. One of my favorite selling courses that I've ever taken is by Tom Hopkins called How to Master the Art of Selling Anything. And he talks about the yes ladder. I think Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar talk about this too, from what I remember. I think they talk about that. Yeah, they talk about it as well. And that's something where you just have to build this yes ladder with people. And the more yeses that you get from people, it's hard for them to back out at the end and backpedal. This is why I think application funnels work so effectively. And as I talked about recently, I found this one where there was 88 different questions that I went through, and I was like, wow, this thing is absolutely ridiculous. Like, how could someone invest all that time and then say no after everything? It's like they've said yes to so many steps. First of all, they've committed their time and their energy at that point to giving you their name and email, and then they've watched 7 or 8 different courses, and then at the end, it's like, hey, and if you're interested in working with me, fill out this ridiculously long application. And then they go and fill out that application. Like, do you think after that they're not going to give you the $75,000 that it costs for that course? Heck no. Like, they're committed at that point. It would be so hard for them to say no. All right. Keep in mind, this works too when you're buying things. So I've been sold some stuff before where this principle worked on me very well. And I'm like, man, like, and it was something where I bought it, and it gave me some results, but it was an okay program. It wasn't that great, to be honest, but It was something, again, where I saw a webinar and then you fill out an application and then they call you and they close over the phone and you go through it. And sure, I learned a lot in that program and it got me some results, but I don't know, there was just some things I didn't like about the program. And after thinking about that, I'm like, okay, how did they get me? And it's like, oh yeah, okay, so it was commitment and consistency, plus all those other principles. They had social proof, they had authority, they had all sorts of other things that worked to their favor to really just help me get closed in the end. And even when I was on the phone call with them, they kept asking me questions, and being like, okay, so do you have the money? Do you have the time? What are you thinking about doing? Like, what kind of experience do you have? Have you been consuming any of our content recently? And every question was a yes. And again, they used the yes ladder on me. And that's ultimately why I ended up buying from them. And now anytime I buy something, I'm always like, okay, like, bail at the beginning when you get a chance, right? It's like, think about it. If you go skiing, think about all the steps that it takes to actually get on the ski hill and start going down, right? First of all, you gotta go and buy the skis, which means going to a store, getting measured, finding the right skis, finding the right boots, finding the right buckles, I think they're called, that the boots clip into. And then you have all that, and then you need to get all the clothing, so you need to get a snowsuit, you need to stay warm, you need to get a hat, you must get goggles, you need to get ski poles as well. Then you need to figure out where you're going to go, like which hill are you going to go to. Okay, so you do all your research, and then finally go there, travel all this place to the ski hill, and you get there, you get all suited up, get on the chairlift, go all the way to the top, and then you're finally going down that hill, and you're like, wee, and then you're finally having a great time. But think about the amount of times you had to say yes throughout that process. You had to say yes to all those things you had to buy, yes to all that time, yes to the fear of not knowing how to ski. It's all these little things leading up to that big sale. This is why I think front-end and back-end offers work pretty well, because if you can get someone on the front-end offer, they're already committed. At that point, you've qualified them as a buyer. So selling them something more expensive on the back end is not going to be that much more difficult, right? And you have to think about this in your ladder, your value ladder too, right? It's hard for you to ask for that $75,000 sale. So maybe you give something away for free in the beginning, right? Which works on the law of reciprocity. Then you sell something for $7 or $27. Then you sell something for a couple $100. Then you sell something for a few $100, then $1,000, then $10,000, then $75,000. It's all those different yeses throughout the process, right? And as long as people are having positive feelings and they're feeling they're getting value at each step of the ladder, it just makes it so much easier once you ultimately ask for that big yes. If you haven't read Influenced by Cialdini, I think that's like one of the most important things. One cool thing that Jason Fladlien does too that I've seen is, and I think he talks about this in Webinar Genius, is at the end of the webinar, his structure is very similar, by the way, to the perfect webinar. There's just some modifications he uses. So one thing that he does at the end is when he goes in the recap before he actually presents the offer is he'll just start talking and be like, all right, guys, like, so here's a recap of what you learned today. You learned this, which means this. You learned this, which means this. You learned this, which means this. Now, let me ask you guys, do you feel our time was well spent to get together today? And it's like, yeah, it was. All right, cool. Do you feel you're more empowered today than you ever were before? Do you feel like you know something and you're empowered, whereas before you felt very confused? Do you feel that you'd be able to implement this stuff and actually get the success? Do you feel that I've given you a lot of value, right? And these are little trial closes that they add, and he builds up, I think, like 5 to 10 different ones, and it's like, yes, 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 yes. And he's like, well, with your permission, I'd like to present you with the offer. And at that point, again, you're probably going to buy. Even on webinars, the conversion rates are getting lower, and it's going to be harder and harder, I think, for webinars to work in the future as a lot of social media platforms like Google and Facebook, they start to crack down on some direct response stuff, because I was looking into that yesterday, and I think that's going to be a big trend you're going to see moving forward. But whenever you're pitching, again, like, you can't just ask for that sale. Again, you have to kind of get that yes ladder going, because at that point, when you ask for the sale, like, it's hard for people psychologically to backpedal and be like, no, when you've gotten all those little yeses, right? The more and more little yeses you can get, the more and more trial closes you have, the more committed someone is actually getting, right? And they've consistently said yes, they've consistently bought in. So when you go and ask for that big sale, it's going to be hard for them to not say no. So I would recommend highly reading Influence by Robert Cialdini and really focusing on that one chapter, because the other stuff, you probably already know about that. A lot of other marketers talk about it, but commitment and consistency, super overlooked when it comes to marketing. Hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Underground Marketing Conspiracy. If you did, consider leaving a review. Maybe you also want to consider subscribing wherever you are listening to this. Maybe refer a friend, listen to a few other episodes as well. My name is Matty Milligan. You can find out more about me if you visit mattymilligan.com, and you can listen to more episodes of this at undergroundmarketingconspiracy.com. I will see you next time on another episode of the Underground Marketing Conspiracy. Ooh.